Welcome back everyone, and thank you for tuning into the channel today where hidden history meets unbelievable value. Because what if I told you that an ordinary looking 1967 quarter, the kind most people would never look twice at, has been rumored, discussed, debated, and whispered about in collector circles as being worth as much as $16 million, a coin that doesn't glitter with gold, doesn't feature a famous mint mark, and doesn't scream luxury at first glance, yet carries within it a perfect storm of timing, mistakes, metal composition mysteries, minting anomalies, transitional errors, die abnormalities, and historical coincidence that together create one of the most fascinating numismatic legends in American coinage. And today we're diving deep into how a 1967 Washington quarter could possibly reach such an astronomical valuation. What exact errors and mistakes would need to exist for that price to even be remotely realistic, and why the tiniest details on a coin smaller then the palm of your hand can be worth more than mansions, supercars, and private islands combined, because in the world of rare coins value is not about age alone, not about shine alone, but about rarity multiplied by demand multiplied by story, and the 1967 quarter exists at a crossroads of American monetary history where mistakes were more likely, oversight was stretched thin, and experimental transitions quietly slipped through the cracks, beginning with the fact that 1967 falls directly in the middle of one of the most chaotic periods in U.S. mint history, a time when silver was being removed from circulating coinage, when hoarding had reached panic levels, when the public no longer trusted the metal content of money, and when the mint itself was under immense pressure to flood circulation with coins quickly, leading to rushed production, relaxed inspection standards, and an environment where errors that would normally be caught and destroyed could escape into circulation, and unlike most years, the coins of 1967 carry no mint marks at all, not because they were all made in one place, but because the mint intentionally removed mint marks between 1965 and 1967 to discourage collectors from hoarding specific issues, which today makes identifying the origin of any error coin from this period vastly more complex and far more intriguing. Because when you cannot easily trace a coin back to a specific mint facility, provenance becomes murkier and the possibility space expands, allowing for speculation that a coin may have originated from experimental batches, test planchets, or transitional metal runs not intended for public release. And this is where the 1967 quarter story begins to shift from ordinary to extraordinary. Because while officially all 1967 quarters were supposed to be struck on copper-nickel clad planchets with an outer layer of cupronickel bonded to a pure copper core, the machinery, planchet supplies, and leftover materials from earlier silver production did not simply vanish overnight, and the mint has historically acknowledged that during transitions, especially during periods of extreme production pressure, wrong planchets have occasionally been fed into presses, creating coins struck on metal compositions that should not exist for that year. And if a genuine 1967 quarter were to be discovered struck on a 90% silver planchet intended for 1964 quarters, or even on an experimental or foreign planchet with unusual metallic properties, its value would already skyrocket into the hundreds of thousands or millions depending on verification. But the $16 million discussion goes even further than just silver content, because the most valuable coins are not simply wrong metal coins, they are combinations of multiple rare errors occurring simultaneously, creating what collectors refer to as a perfect error storm. And one of the most talked about possibilities is a 1967 quarter struck on a silver planchet and then struck again, either through a double strike, off-center strike, or blockage error, where the coin is impressed by another coin instead of a die, resulting in ghostly mirror images, ink-use designs, or overlapping impressions that should never coexist on a properly struck quarter. And when these dramatic errors occur on already illegal or unintended metal compositions, the rarity compounds exponentially, because you are no longer talking about one mistake but a cascade of failures across multiple stages of minting, from planchet preparation to press operation to quality control, and each layer of failure multiplies value rather than merely adding to it. And then there is the possibility of die errors themselves, because dies in the 1960s were used extensively and sometimes far beyond their intended lifespan, leading to die cracks, die breaks, retained cut errors, and even catastrophic die failures where chunks of the die break away leaving large raised blobs of metal on the finished coin. and if such a die were used to strike a coin on an unintended planchet, the result would be a coin that is not only compositionally wrong but visually dramatic, a coin that looks broken, melted, distorted, or monstrous compared to normal issues, which collectors crave because they tell a story at a glance, and stories are currency in numismatics just as much as metal content is. And when a coin visually screams that something went wrong, it becomes instantly desirable, but the $16 million valuation also hinges on the idea of uniqueness or near uniqueness, because while many error coins exist, the truly priceless ones are those for which only one example is known or plausibly could exist, and if a 1967 quarter were proven to be the sole survivor of a specific experimental run or accidental test strike, its value would be dictated not by price guides but by auction warfare, where wealthy collectors, museums, and private investors bid against each other. Driven by ego, prestige, and the fear of never seeing another chance like it again, and this is not hypothetical, because numismatic history is filled with examples like the 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle, the 1913 Liberty Head nickel, and the 1804 silver dollar, all coins whose values exploded not merely because of age or beauty but because of controversy, mystery, and restricted survival, and the 1967 quarter sits in a similar conceptual space if the right combination of errors exists. Because unlike ancient coins or early American issues, a modern-era error challenges assumptions, forcing collectors to confront the idea that something so recent and seemingly mundane could rival legendary rarities in value, and this psychological tension adds fuel to the fire, making the story more compelling and the bidding more aggressive. And then we must talk about transitional errors specifically, because 1967 is part of the transition away from silver, and transitional errors are among the most valuable mistakes in coin collecting, occurring when coins of 1 year are accidentally struck using planchets intended for a previous or future composition, and documented transitional errors like 1943 copper cents or 1944 steel cents have sold for hundreds of thousands or millions. And if a 1967 quarter were struck not only on silver but on a planchet composition that was never officially acknowledged, such as an experimental alloy tested internally by the mint, the coin would cross into uncharted territory where valuation becomes speculative but potentially astronomical, because experimental pieces are not meant to exist at all, and their survival implies an internal breakdown of protocol that fascinates collectors and historians alike. And adding to this is the issue of documentation, because if such a coin surfaced without accompanying mint records, its authentication would require advanced metallurgical testing, die state analysis, and provenance research, all of which would generate publicity, debate, and academic scrutiny, driving awareness and demand even higher. And the more controversial and discussed a coin becomes, the more its perceived importance grows, sometimes beyond what its physical attributes alone would justify, because coins are artifacts of trust, and when trust is broken or questioned, fascination follows. And the 1967 quarter represents a moment when trust in coinage was already fragile due to silver removal, making any deviation from the official narrative even more potent, and this is why collectors obsess over weight anomalies, edge coloration, magnetic response, acoustic ring tests, and microscopic die markers on 1967 quarters, searching for signs that a coin does not conform to the standard copper-nickel clad profile, because even a slight deviation in weight or sound can indicate something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. And when such indicators align with visible strike anomalies, the coin becomes a candidate for life-changing value, and the $16 million figure, while extreme, is not pulled from thin air, because in a scenario where a single verified specimen combines wrong planchet, dramatic strike error, unique die state, and historical timing, the value would be set not by logic but by competition, because at the highest levels of collecting money becomes secondary to legacy. And owning the most famous error coin of the modern era would secure a collector's place in numismatic history forever, and that promise is priceless to the right buyer. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most important element of value, which is belief. Next, 1982 D quarter dollar. Today, where everyday objects can hide extraordinary secrets, because today we're exploring one of the most shocking and controversial ideas in modern coin collecting, the possibility that a seemingly ordinary 1982 D Washington quarter could be worth as much as $15 million due to a perfect storm of errors, mistakes, minting anomalies, transitional metal confusion, and historical circumstances that align so precisely they create a coin that challenges everything. People think they know about value, rarity, and money itself, and at first glance the idea sounds impossible because 1982 is not ancient, it is not a key date in most price guides, and quarters from that year are still found in circulation, yet this is exactly why the story is so compelling, because the most valuable coins are often born not from intention but from chaos. And 1982 represents one of the most chaotic, misunderstood, and error-prone periods in the history of United States coinage. A year when the mint was struggling with metal costs, supply issues, equipment transitions, and unprecedented pressure to keep coins flowing into circulation despite rising inflation and public distrust in the currency system, and when you combine those pressures with human error and mechanical limitations, you create the ideal conditions for numismatic anomalies that were never meant to exist, let alone survive. And the 1982 D quarter exists right at the center of this storm, because while most people associate 1982 transitional errors with Lincoln cents due to the shift from copper to zinc, far fewer realize that the quarter denomination was also affected indirectly by the same economic forces, supply chain disruptions, and internal experimentation that plagued the mint at the time. And these indirect effects open the door to rare and potentially priceless errors that would not be obvious to casual observers, starting with the Denver Mint itself, because the D mint mark indicates production at a facility that in 1982 was operating at extremely high output levels with aging equipment, heavily reused dies, and intense pressure to minimize downtime, all of which significantly increase the probability of errors escaping detection, and when errors occur repeatedly in the same environment, they can compound rather than cancel out, creating coins that carry multiple abnormalities at once, and the first major category of error that brings a 1982 D quarter into million-dollar territory is wrong planchet errors, because while quarters in 1982 were officially supposed to be struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets, the reality of mint operations is that planchets are manufactured separately, stored in bulk, transported, and fed into presses using automated systems that are not infallible, and during periods of transition or experimentation, planchets intended for other denominations, foreign contracts, or internal testing can and have been mixed into domestic production lines, and if a 1982 D quarter were struck on a planchet of incorrect composition, such as a silver planchet left over from earlier decades, an experimental alloy tested for durability or cost reduction, or even a foreign planchet with unusual metallic properties, the resulting coin would immediately become an extreme rarity, because such a coin would represent not just a mistake but a breach of protocol that was never documented, and undocumented anomalies are the most dangerous and exciting category for collectors because their rarity cannot be quantified, and when rarity cannot be quantified, value becomes speculative and potentially limitless, and the $15 million valuation discussion emerges when you consider the possibility of a unique wrong planchet strike combined with additional striking errors, because a single error alone rarely reaches 8 figures. But multiple errors layered onto one coin create exponential rarity, not linear rarity, and this is where strike anomalies come into play, because a 1982 D quarter could theoretically be double struck, off-center struck, or struck through debris, grease, or foreign material while also being on the wrong planchet, creating visual distortions that would immediately signal something extraordinary even to non-experts. And double strikes in particular are highly prized because they reveal the mechanics of the minting process frozen in time, showing misalignment, rotation, or partial impressions that should never coexist on a finished coin, and when those impressions appear on an illegal or experimental metal composition, the coin becomes a forensic artifact as much as a collectible, drawing interest not only from collectors but from historians and metallurgists. And then there are die errors, which are especially relevant to the Denver Mint in the early 1980s because dies were used aggressively to reduce costs, often resulting in die cracks, die chips, retained cuds, and in extreme cases, shattered dies that continued striking coins even after structural failure, producing dramatic raised blobs, missing details, or distorted lettering, and if such a damaged die were used to strike a quarter on the wrong planchet, the visual impact would be undeniable, creating a coin that looks visibly broken, warped, or incomplete, which collectors love because the error is obvious without magnification. And obvious errors generate stronger emotional reactions, which directly translates to higher bidding intensity at auction, and bidding intensity is what pushes coins from hundreds of thousands into millions, and beyond die damage there is the possibility of hub doubling or double die errors, where the design itself is misaligned during the die creation process, leading to doubled lettering, dates, or design elements that are part of the die rather than the strike, and doubled die quarters are rare in general. But a 1982D double die quarter combined with other anomalies would be nearly unheard of, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value, because collectors can accept high prices if they believe they are buying something that will never appear again, and the 1982D quarter has another factor working in its favor, which is that it comes from a year without a clear narrative in mainstream numismatics, meaning fewer people scrutinize these coins closely, allowing extreme rarities to potentially sit unnoticed for decades, and coins that surface after long dormancy often generate massive excitement because they challenge established assumptions, and when assumptions are challenged, markets react strongly, sometimes irrationally, driving prices far beyond what price guides would predict. And the $15 million idea also depends on provenance, because if such a coin were discovered in an unexpected context, such as an old roll, an estate collection, or even circulation, the story would amplify its appeal dramatically, because collectors love discovery narratives, the idea that treasure can still be found in ordinary places, and discovery narratives add cultural value on top of physical rarity, and cultural value is what transforms a rare object into a legend, and legends do not have price ceilings, and the 1982D quarter sits at an intersection of modern familiarity and hidden complexity, because people recognize the design instantly, yet assume it holds no secrets, and when that assumption is proven wrong, the psychological shock increases perceived value, making collectors more willing to pay extreme premiums, and this is reinforced by the fact that 1982 was a year of intense economic anxiety, with inflation, high interest rates, and public skepticism toward government institutions, and coins produced during periods of instability often carry symbolic weight beyond their material properties, because they represent resilience, adaptation, and sometimes failure, and a coin that embodies a failure of the system while surviving intact becomes a powerful symbol, and symbols are worth more than metal, and this symbolic dimension is why a single 1982D quarter, if proven to combine wrong planchet composition, dramatic strike error, severe die damage, and unique provenance, could plausibly ignite bidding wars among elite collectors, investors, and institutions who are not simply buying a coin but buying a story, a conversation piece, and a permanent place in numismatic history. And as values climb into 8 figures, traditional valuation methods break down entirely, because the buyer pool shifts from hobbyists to ultra-wealthy individuals for whom money is not a constraint but legacy is, and owning the most valuable modern U.S. quarter ever discovered would confer instant recognition and status within a niche but passionate community, and that recognition can be more motivating than financial return, pushing bids higher than logic alone would justify. And this is why the idea of a $15,1,982D quarter persists, because while the odds of such a coin existing are extremely low, they are not zero, and history has repeatedly shown that zero becomes one more often than experts expect, and as long as the possibility remains, collectors will continue examining 1982D quarters for unusual weight, sound, color, strike quality, edge appearance, and microscopic details, hoping to find evidence that their coin does not conform to the standard copper-nickel clad profile, because the difference between a face-value quarter and a life-changing artifact can be measured in fractions of a gram, microns of metal, or a single misaligned strike. Next. 1989D quarter dollar, today where ordinary coins hide extraordinary stories, because today we're diving into one of the most fascinating and jaw-dropping cases in modern numismatics, the 1989D Washington quarter, a coin that at first glance looks just like any other quarter from that year, yet collectors, historians, and investors alike have speculated that under the right conditions it could be worth as much as $14 million, a staggering number for a coin that most people assume is worth no more than its face value or perhaps a few dollars in uncirculated condition, but the reason this coin is potentially so valuable lies entirely in its errors, mistakes, and the extraordinary possibilities that could converge in a single specimen to create a once-in-a-lifetime collectible. And at first glance it's hard to imagine what kind of error on a 1989 D quarter could generate such astronomical value, because unlike ancient coins or key-date rarities, 1989 is a modern year with millions of quarters minted, yet rarity is not always about scarcity in numbers, it is about uniqueness, historical significance, and the way multiple errors can compound into a coin that becomes effectively irreplaceable. And the 1989 D quarter is particularly intriguing because the Denver Mint in that year was operating under high-pressure conditions, managing increased production demands, aging machinery, and ongoing adjustments to metal composition, all of which set the stage for potential mistakes. And when mistakes do occur during such periods, they can take forms ranging from subtle anomalies to dramatic, visually striking errors that captivate collectors immediately. And one major category of error that could make a 1989 D quarter extraordinary is wrong planchet composition, because although quarters that year were officially struck on copper-nickel clad planchets with a pure copper core and cupronickel outer layers, there were still lingering possibilities for leftover experimental planchets, test planchets, or even accidental silver planchets from prior decades to enter the production line, and a quarter struck on such a planchet would be instantly noticeable to collectors and numismatists because the weight, sound, magnetic properties, and coloration would deviate from normal expectations. And while a single wrong planchet is already valuable, the true astronomical potential emerges when you combine that wrong planchet with multiple strike errors, such as off-center strikes, double strikes, or broad strikes, because these mechanical anomalies create coins that are visually dramatic, often appearing to have been twisted, stretched, or duplicated in ways that defy ordinary minting logic, and the interplay between the planchet anomaly and strike irregularities produces a coin that is both scientifically and aesthetically remarkable, capturing the attention of collectors, researchers, and museums alike. And then there are die errors, which are equally important in understanding how a 1989 D quarter could reach a $14 million valuation, because dies in the late 1980s were often pushed to extreme usage limits, leading to issues such as die cracks, die chips, die cuts, and even die breaks, all of which leave permanent marks on coins that are highly prized when combined with other anomalies. And if such a die error occurred on a quarter with an unusual planchet, the result would be a one-of-a-kind coin that cannot be reproduced, which is precisely the type of uniqueness that drives collectors to pay extraordinary sums. And uniqueness is the ultimate multiplier of value, because while many errors exist, a coin that can be plausibly claimed as the only known example of a combined wrong planchet, dramatic die error, and strike anomaly enters a market where competition is driven not just by money but by legacy, prestige, and the desire to own something that will never appear again. And in the case of the 1989 D quarter, another layer of potential value comes from subtle misalignments and doubling errors that might have occurred during die preparation, which could produce doubled lettering, doubled numbers, or ghostly impressions of design elements, known as doubled dies. And doubled dies are among the most highly collectible modern errors because they reveal the mechanics of coin production frozen in time, allowing experts to trace exactly how and when the anomaly occurred. And when a doubled die combines with unusual planchet composition and striking errors, the coin becomes both a numismatic curiosity and a forensic artifact, documenting a failure in the mint's quality control while simultaneously being visually striking and historically significant. And beyond die errors, planchet mistakes, and strike irregularities, another fascinating factor is the possibility of hub doubling or misaligned hubs, where the die itself carries a partial duplication or rotation of design elements from the hubbing process, leading to coins that show subtle but unmistakable doubling effects on date numerals, mint marks, or the portrait of George Washington. And when such a feature occurs alongside other anomalies, the rarity escalates dramatically, because collectors place enormous value on items that challenge the known production norms. And the rarity is compounded even further if the coin carries signs of transitional experimentation at the mint, such as variations in alloy mixtures, Planchet thickness, or metallic impurities that should not exist in officially released circulation coins, because each of these variations adds an extra layer of complexity, documentation challenge, and provenance intrigue, and provenance itself is a crucial element in determining value, because coins discovered in unusual contexts, such as long-forgotten rolls from banks, estate collections, or previously unknown mint caches, often generate extraordinary interest, and the story of discovery elevates perceived importance far beyond the physical characteristics of the coin alone, which is why many ultra-valuable coins are as much about narrative as they are about metal, strike, or design, and the 1989 D quarter is no exception, because if a coin surfaced that combined wrong planchet composition, off-center striking, double die anomalies, and die cracks, all verified by professional grading and authentication, the narrative alone would attract the attention of collectors willing to bid millions to secure it, and auctions at that level are as much about competition, prestige, and historical legacy as about investment value, because the highest-tier collectors often operate in a market where rarity and fame dictate price, not simply metal content, and that's why a single 1989 D quarter, if it truly embodied the perfect confluence of these factors, could hypothetically reach $14 million, because the coin would become a once-in-a-century collectible, a tangible piece of numismatic history that represents both mechanical failure and artistic accident, a modern treasure frozen in time, and the allure is heightened further by the fact that 1989 is a year many collectors might overlook, giving the coin an air of hidden potential, a sense that something extraordinary could be lurking in plain sight. And this psychological element drives meticulous scrutiny of all surviving coins from that year, with collectors weighing them, analyzing metallic composition, inspecting under high magnification, and even performing advanced metallurgical and acoustic tests to detect anomalies that are invisible to the naked eye, because the difference between an ordinary circulated quarter and a multi-million-dollar anomaly can be measured in fractions of a gram, microns of die shift, or subtle variations in surface texture, and that is what makes modern errors so fascinating, because they exist in a world of seemingly infinite coins, yet a single mechanical and compositional failure can create an artifact worth more than luxury homes, rare art, or sports franchises, and beyond physical attributes, the symbolic and historical significance plays a role as well, because a 1989 D quarter with multiple verified errors represents a breakdown in process, a glimpse into the pressures and challenges of the Denver Mint during a period of transition, and human error, industrial limits, and the relentless push for mass production collide to create a coin that is not only rare but meaningful, and meaning in numismatics drives competition at the highest levels, because buyers are not just purchasing metal, they are purchasing story, history, and cultural relevance, and that drives the perceived value far beyond what traditional numismatic price guides would suggest, and this is why the $14 million valuation, while extreme, is discussed seriously in collector circles, because history repeatedly demonstrates that coins previously thought to be worthless can, under the right conditions, emerge as legends commanding astonishing sums, and the 1989 D quarter represents that tantalizing possibility, a modern artifact hiding extraordinary potential, a coin whose worth is limited not by metal content. Last 1995 P quarter dollar, today where ordinary coins can conceal extraordinary secrets, because today we're diving into a story that sounds almost unbelievable but is entirely rooted in numismatic reality, the 1995 P Washington quarter, a coin most people would never give a second glance, yet under the right circumstances, with the right combination of errors, mistakes, and anomalies, it has been discussed in collector circles as potentially worth $12 million, a mind-boggling figure for a coin that officially circulated in the millions and that many would assume is entirely common and ordinary, but the truth of coin collecting is that value is not dictated solely by mint numbers or age, it is dictated by uniqueness, error complexity, historical context, and the perfect alignment of circumstances that transforms a mundane object into an irreplaceable treasure. And the 1995 P quarter is particularly fascinating because it comes from a period when the United States Mint was operating under intense production pressures, dealing with aging presses, transitioning dies, increased public demand for circulating coins, and ongoing experiments with planchet quality and alloy composition, all of which dramatically increase the probability of errors slipping through, and while many errors are minor or overlooked, the potential for a coin to carry multiple errors simultaneously is what transforms it from a collectible into a legend, and one of the most compelling scenarios. For a 1995 P quarter to reach $12 million involves wrong planchet strikes, because although quarters that year were officially struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets, the mint's internal experimentation with different alloys, leftover planchets from earlier experimental runs, and the occasional misfeed of planchets intended for other denominations could theoretically produce a coin with a composition entirely unintended for circulation, and a coin struck on such a planchet would immediately attract attention from collectors, metallurgists, and numismatic experts because it would be an anomaly detectable through weight analysis, magnetic properties, sound tests, and microscopic inspection, and while a single planchet error is valuable, the most coveted coins arise when multiple errors converge, creating a cascade of mistakes that can never be replicated. And the 1995 P quarter scenario expands further when you consider striking errors, because coins can be struck off center, double struck, broad struck, or struck with debris between the die and the planchet, producing visually dramatic distortions such as overlapping images, ghosting of design elements, or incomplete impressions, and these strike errors are magnified in significance when combined with unusual planchet composition, because collectors do not simply see a mistake, they see a coin that defies all known standards, effectively turning a mechanical accident into a unique work of art, and die errors also play a crucial role in this potential valuation, because dies in the mid-1990s, especially at the Philadelphia Mint, were often used extensively to reduce production costs, and extended die life increases the risk of die cracks, die chips, cuds, and even shattered dies, producing coins with large raised blobs of metal, missing portions of the design, or distorted lettering. And if such a die error occurred on a wrong planchet with strike anomalies, the coin would be unique in multiple dimensions, composition, striking, and die, which is precisely what drives ultra-high valuations, because rarity alone is not enough. Collectors pay extreme sums for coins that combine multiple forms of rarity, especially if only one verified specimen exists, and uniqueness is the ultimate multiplier of value. Because the market for coins at this level is not governed by conventional price guides but by competitive bidding among collectors and institutions for a coin that cannot be replicated. Ensuring that the highest bids are limited only by perceived historical and numismatic significance, and further complexity can arise from double die errors, where during the die creation process, misalignment or multiple impressions from the hub can cause doubled lettering, numbers, or design elements. And double dies from this period are highly collectible because they allow experts to trace exactly how and when the error occurred, and when such a doubling is paired with wrong planchet and striking anomalies, the coin becomes both a visual spectacle and a forensic artifact, revealing a multi-layered failure in the mint process while being historically significant, and even more possibilities exist in transitional errors, because the mid-1990s were a time of experimentation and incremental changes in the mint's quality control and planchet sourcing, meaning small deviations in alloy mixtures, planchet thickness, or even edge characteristics could result in coins that technically fall outside the official specifications, and each deviation adds a layer of intrigue, investigation, and value, especially when authenticated and documented, and provenance also plays a crucial role in the potential $12 million valuation, because coins discovered in unusual contexts such as old bank rolls, forgotten collections, or uncirculated estate caches create compelling discovery narratives that elevate perceived importance, and the story of the coin can sometimes drive its market value higher than its intrinsic characteristics, because collectors are often as invested in history and narrative as they are in metal, strike, and design, and when the discovery of a unique error coin coincides with a strong narrative, the auction excitement can be enormous, sometimes surpassing all expectations, and psychological factors contribute as well, because the idea that an ordinary-looking 1995 P quarter could secretly be worth $12 million captivates the imagination, driving meticulous scrutiny of all surviving coins from that year, with collectors weighing them, measuring them, inspecting under magnification, and even performing advanced metallurgical, acoustic, and imaging tests to identify anomalies invisible to the naked eye, because the difference between an everyday coin and a once-in-a-lifetime anomaly can be measured in microns, fractions of a gram, or subtle die shifts, and when such differences align to produce a coin that is visually, compositionally, and historically unique, the potential for life-changing value emerges, and this fascination is amplified by the fact that 1995 is a modern year, meaning coins from this period are ubiquitous and seemingly mundane, which heightens the dramatic contrast when an anomaly is discovered, transforming something familiar into a miracle, and beyond physical and mechanical attributes. The symbolic and historical significance of a coin also contributes to its value, because a 1995 p. quarter with multiple verified errors represents not just a mechanical accident but a glimpse into the pressures, challenges, and human limitations of the Philadelphia Mint at the time, and such a coin embodies both historical context and numismatic curiosity, which drives competition at the highest levels, because buyers are not simply purchasing metal, they are purchasing story, legacy, and cultural relevance, and that is what elevates the coin into ultra-high value territory, making the idea of $12 million plausible in a market where rarity, uniqueness, discovery narrative, historical significance, and emotional impact converge. And finally, the 1995 p quarter scenario underscores a fundamental principle in coin collecting, that miracles are mechanical, and sometimes machines, human oversight, and materials combine in such rare and dramatic ways that they produce artifacts worth far more than anyone could predict, and the perfect convergence of wrong planchet composition, dramatic striking errors, die damage, double dies, transitional anomalies, and compelling provenance creates a coin that is literally irreplaceable, a coin that collectors, historians, and investors alike would compete fiercely to acquire, not merely as a collectible but as a singular, once-in-a-lifetime piece of numismatic history. And the legend of the $12,001,995 p quarter continues to captivate, inspire, and drive scrutiny, because it embodies the ultimate dream of coin collecting, that hidden among the millions of mundane coins we overlook every day, there may be a single miraculous anomaly that can change everything for the lucky person who finds it, and as long as that possibility exists, collectors will continue searching, analyzing, and imagining, knowing that even in modern coinage,